Hello and thank you for joining this UK India Business Council and BSI webinar today, discussing sustainability in the food and drink industry and transforming products into commodities. We have an excellent lineup of industry experts, both from BSI and stalwarts from India's food and drink landscape. With both the UK and India's commitments to reduce their carbon footprints by the end of the decade, this webinar comes at an opportune time as we delve into the social and environmental sustainability trends in the food and drink sector. Today's session will focus on the importance of building trust and meaning behind products, explore the crucial role of food safety and food assurance, and also look into the current regulatory trends and best practices incorporated by various F&D stakeholders. Before we move ahead, I would like to highlight a few points. Firstly, we would love to hear your thoughts, comments, and questions. So please do feel free to drop these into the chat box on your control panel, and we will pick these up during the session. Secondly, if you're on social media, please do follow us and our partners on Twitter and LinkedIn. You will see our handles on your screen. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guest, David Horlock. David is the Managing Director, Global Food and Retail Supply Chain at BSI, and brings 38 years of experience in agri-food, life science, commodities, consumer products, and international standards and certification to today's discussion. His expertise lies in organizational resilience, operational resilience, and supply chain resilience. David is an expert in establishing the necessary best practice guidelines to ensure businesses can stand the test of time and changing trends. David, we look forward to your presentation.
Well, Kadambari, thank you very much for that very warm and very smooth introduction. Hello, ladies and gentlemen and fellow panelists. It's lovely to be here today to share with you transforming commodities into products. So I'd just like to set the scene to start with and talk a little bit about how standards can unlock the UN SDGs, talk a bit about the customer promise and the importance of having a meaning behind your product, and then finally talking about transforming commodities to products. So the first slide, please. So here we have the UN SDGs. There are 17 of these, and they basically encapsulate, all the key critical global issues on the planet today that, organizations need to be thinking about. And everybody is obviously talking about this. And, over the years, we've moved from physical product quality, which is the physical attributes of a product, to process quality, which is about how do you make it and repeatability, and then it's about behavior quality. So the UN SDGs is very much about behavior as well, in terms of being a good corporate and a global citizen, and your reputation is your brand. So your behavior is as important as process quality and physical product attributes. There are some 2,000 standards which actually underpin the UN SDGs. So you're not alone out there, right? What a lot of people don't realize is there's some really good best practice standards out there which address many of those requirements. Next slide, please. So it's really important to reflect on your brand as your reputation. And one of the questions that you can ask yourselves is, how do you know if you're doing enough in this area? And the first box there is more so about the what. This is about meeting your UN SDG goals and objectives. Many large corporations today, brands, are looking at how to infuse and integrate and embed those requirements and that storytelling into the brand. The second box there is very much about the how. This is a meaning and this is the output. How are you going to validate that? How are you going to measure that? How are you going to measure your ESGs? And then the third box is very much about, the benefits, the why. This is about providing the trust to investors and to stakeholders and to customers. This is know it to be true. So the next slide, please. So this slide is very much about your brand ecosystem. My experience shows that many people go straight into ESG reporting, but there are some fundamental things that you need to do first. Number one is start from the inside, practice what you preach. So what I mean by that is This is your own site and your own facility. This is your own business, right? You need to behave the way you want to project, right? So, you know, get your own house in order. Once you've done that, you can then start talking about what's important in your supply chain. So, because your product or your brand or your service is only as good as the weakest link in your supply chain. So this is part of your community. So how are you going to keep them accountable? Who are your suppliers? Where are they? Do they adhere to your corporate values? Are you sort of managing them? Do you know where they are? Now, once you've done your supply chain, then you have your brand ecosystem in place. Then you can start doing your ESG reporting. But if you don't get your facility right and your suppliers right, your ESG reporting will just be a reporting exercise. It's not going to be driving any change in any fundamental sort of outputs. Next slide, please. So here we have a continuous process, a continuous improvement to drive supply chain resilience and ensure that your ESGs remain relevant, and you go on a cycle of continuous benchmarking and continuous improvement to maintain your relevance. Next slide, please. Now, this is just one really good standard out there. It's important that we embrace good standards, and this standard here, many people don't know about. It's not a standard you certify to, it's a guidance document, and it's ISO 20400, and it looks at sustainable procurement. And this is, you know, something that you can engage in your procurement, in your supply chain, and you know, tell your supply chain story, and that you are adopting best practice in terms of procurement practices and keeping your suppliers accountable. Next slide, please. So one of the key things I say to a lot of our customers that we have business relationships with, we say, you know, don't think of certification as just compliance. It's another certificate, because it's not, right? It's really about building trust and building confidence. And I encourage many organizations, even big companies like McDonald's, do a lot of fantastic things, but they were really bad at telling their supply chain story. And I find many organizations do wonderful things, but they're not good at telling their story. And if you don't tell your story, no one's going to tell it for you. So I say, you know, sit down with the operational people, the sales people, the marketing people, the compliance people, to brainstorm and ask these questions, right? And the first question is, you know, what are the unique factors that make your product different? What are the things that make your company different? The next one, click. What is the product process flow diagram? Have you actually mapped it out and looked at the life cycle and the unintended consequences of what you're doing and where you're buying from? The unintended consequences. 3, what are your suppliers? You know, who are they? Their credentials, their behaviors, their impacts. The 4th one, how do you explain this to customers? So, you know, it's a bit of a spaghetti junction out there, but you've got to unravel this into very simple words, and that's where the marketing people come in to try to tell your supply chain story. Next. Translate this to your customer promise. The next. And then what controls you need to put in place to make this repeatable, consistent, and trustworthy, right? And that's really important. And as Aristotle said in the 1600s, he says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is therefore not an act, but a habit. So this is where standards come in, because they provide the discipline to do the right thing and a mechanism for continuous improvement. And then finally, next click. What is needed to test, validate, and certify? So when you put a certification system in place, you're embedding, right, the discipline to be able to do this continuously, time after time after time. Next slide, please. So this one here looks at the 6 steps to actually build resilience. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're quite, you know, start off with planning, and then, you know, look at your site, then look at your suppliers, look at your ecosystem, measure it, right, monitor it, and then continuously improve in a never-ending sort of cycle of continuous improvement. Next slide, please. So that's the first part of the question, was talking about the importance of the UN SDGs and integrating that into your brand promise. It's going to be very important to get product, process and behavior right, and the UN SDGs is a way of doing that. The second question was about the importance of standards, and this is something that BSI does. We're a Royal Charter company. We were founded, many years ago as the world's first national standards body and the founding member of ISO, which has a signatory of 165 countries. And our job is to shape standards for critical global issues to reduce costs, improve performance, and ensure sustainability. So we shape around 2,500 new standards every year. We eliminate around 1,500. We have around 80,000 best practice standards there, British standards, ISO standards, EN standards, private standards, publicly available specifications. We then train and qualify people on those standards, because the standard really is a recipe of best practice. Think of it as a recipe. But a standard has no value until it's actually used, until it's understood, until it's documented, until it's implemented. And then we assess, and the assessment is important because that helps with your certification. It provides a discipline to do the right thing and a mechanism for continuous improvement. And then there is this support. So that's a basic business model, identifying critical issues because they change with society all the time, and then you go on the shape, share, embed, assess, support process. Now the next slide, please. So if you're sitting inside an organization and you're on the group executive board, or you're in charge of, UN SDGs, or you're responsible for IT or supply chain procurement, or, whatever it may be, you probably want to be the best that you can be in that. And this is where, there are a lot of standards out there, 2,000 plus standards out there that can make you the best that you can be at your job function and make you look good and make your business look good. Next slide, please. So here would be an example of standards. If I was talking to someone on a group executive board or a non-executive director on a board of a company, I would say these are really important standards that you at least need to be aware of or understand moving into a modern world today, right? Where we have so many obligations and requirements. Effective governance, organizational resilience, circular economy, business continuity, health and well-being. People are becoming increasingly important on the radar screen. Quality management, information security, food safety, health and safety, and innovation management. So these are some, really important standards for a group exec, somebody that's creating the vision for the organization and keeping it on track. Next slide, please. These are some of the great standards out there for sustainability. You've got environment, circular economy, biodiversity, waste, adaptation to climate change, greenhouse gas, footprinting, carbon neutrality, and sustainable procurement. So these are just some examples. So as I said, you're not alone. There's some good documents out there to go through. You don't need to get certified to all of them. You maybe pick one or two, but you can at least use the contents of those standards to develop your own specifications. Next, please. So let me just finish on now transforming commodities to products. So I've spoken a bit about the importance of the UN SDGs. I've spoken about the importance of standards. There are a lot of standards out there to help you. And now I just want to talk a bit about commodities and products. And I'm coming very much from a former agronomist and animal production specialist that I used to be. So when I look at a commodity, I ask myself the question that, what is a commodity? And it's usually a raw material or it's a primary agricultural product that can be bought and sold. It tends to be mass market. It tends to drive to lowest cost producer. And the problem with that is that it has unintended consequences, because that means that we just, do multiple cropping, we use insecticides, herbicides, we deplete our topsoil, we have issues with waste, we have issues with, human rights and labor, because we're not costing the cost of those damages and environmental damage to the people or the ecosystem and so forth. And as a result of that, we know that 30% of our arable land today is just depleted. There is no topsoil left there. It's cyclic and erratic pricing with supply and demand shifts. It's much harder to differentiate because you're a price taker at the mercy of the markets, and it's limited value added. So this is, commodity rice, cereals, grains, and so forth. But that's the nature of the commodity market. If we go to the next one and talk about products, next slide, we see that a product or product branding is usually a symbol or a design that identifies and differentiates a product. So it's value-added pricing opportunity. There's a brand, symbol, logo, color, certification mark, packaging, or promotion. There's a narrative or a story behind the product. It's evolving attributes shifting with societal values. And the quality attributes expand from the physical attributes to the product to the meaning. So let me give you an example there. If you look at eggs, you can have cage eggs. Cage eggs are today a commodity. Free range may be upscaling. Organics may be upscaling even more. Fortified with omega, vitamin B12, omega-5, omega-6, freedom foods, animal welfare, maybe other ways. But I go into my local supermarket and I can buy eggs there which are $1.50 per dozen, and I can buy eggs which are $5 per dozen. That's 4 times more. I can go into my supermarket and buy a wine for $5, and I can buy a wine for $100 a bottle. I can buy a container of honey for $3, and I can buy one for $25, the Manuka Doctor. Now, the sunshine is the same, the rain is the same, the land is the same, the water is the same, the fundamentals are the same, the story is different. And I say that we can't keep telling people that cheap is best, because cheap is best will just lead to degradation, right, and exploitation of the environment and the people in the ecosystem. So telling a story is a great way to add value to a product. That's why I love helping people tell their supply chain story. So next slide, please. So you can, yes, press and click all those buttons. So, we did some research and looked at trust out there, and we found that 30-odd years, 50 years ago, I think it was, people used to spend around 50% of their income on food. Today, it's around 10%. So that means people are a lot more discerning. We used to consume as an essential mean of just staying alive. Today, we're consuming for pleasure. And what the research shows us is that consumers equate food with pleasure. And pleasure means taste. It then means trust. And it means the meaning that's behind the product. So I really encourage people to think about, taste, trust, and meaning. These are the 3 key ingredients of pleasure. Next slide, please. And you'll probably find today that when you go and buy products or you go into restaurants, people are becoming a lot more sophisticated in terms of their branding, telling the story behind the product, selling the experience. And these are just some of the attributes out there which are really important and have a value attached to them, whether it's provenance or origin or heritage or biodiversity or farming methods or packaging or purity or variety, or circular economy practices or reducing waste or having, responsible packaging. They're all part of your story. And the art is identifying what they are, communicating it in a simple context, producing it repeatedly, and getting a premium for it. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide here with an example of how that would be done. Now, we've done that with, wine, we've done it with meat products, we've done it with horticultural products, we've done it with beverages. So in this sort of scenario, you would sit down and you would brainstorm, and you'd bring the operational people together, you bring the sales and marketing people together, you bring the exec together, and you say, okay, what is it in our customer promise? What are we actually mapping? Let's look at our processing and labeling, ingredients, packaging, Let's look at our provenance, variety, supply chain, CSR, ethics. Let's look at land, environment, production, waste, nature, energy consumption. Now, when we look at those in independent silos, they tend to be mechanisms of compliance. They tend to be a certificate on the wall. But when you look at it in a holistic way, many organizations are really falling short from telling their supply chain story. And each one of those elements is a mechanism of differentiation against a commodity, and a differentiation where you can actually add more, because then your price is not being compared with a commodity. It's being compared with something of similar quality. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of setting the scene. We've spoken about the NSDGs. We've talked about the importance of standards. We've tried to differentiate between a commodity and a product. And we've got an example here where we try to bring it all together with all the stakeholders in the organization, putting their collective brain power together to get collective best practice, to then give the marketing guys a challenge in terms of how to distill that, right, into a customer promise of brand and value. So I'll stop there now. Thank you very much. And I hope I've sort of set the scene there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Your presentation is a great starting point for our onward discussion. If any of our viewers have questions for David, please do send these through so we can pick them up during the Q&A. I'd now like to welcome my incredible colleague, Shubhi Mishra, who's done all things food and drink at UKIBC and who will be moderating today's panel discussion. Shubhi is joined by Namrata Khanna, who comes with over 30 years of varied experience in the sector. Namrata is currently director of the India Honey Alliance, which is a consortium of stakeholders from across the value chain of the Indian honey industry. We are also very pleased to have on the panel Azhar Tambuwala, who is the co-founder at Sahyadri Farms, a leading farmer-producer company involved in building an integrated food facility for the benefit of the marginal growers in the Maharashtra region. Over to you, Shubhi. Shubhi, I think you're on mute.
Yes, sorry, I was muted by the organizer is what it was saying. Sorry, guys. Thank you, Kadambari, and thank you, David, for that very relevant context. Indeed, a food for thought for all of us, that if you won't tell your supply chain story, then who else will? This will actually help us define our narrative better on the subject topic. With this, for those of you who know Azharji and Sahyadri will know what your reputation is your brand means. And for others, may I please request Azharji to kindly give us a short introduction of Sahyadri Agro for audience's benefit. Azharji, please.
Thank you, Shubhi. Thank you for having me here. Good afternoon and good morning to people from different parts of the world. Just a very quick one over here is Sahyadri Farmers Producer Company Limited, that's as the name goes, is actually an FPO, and in India it's a hybrid model of a cooperative where only growers can be shareholders of the company and nobody outside of being a grower can be. So we are a cooperative, but an FPO hybrid cooperative of about 750 growers with about 10,000 growers also linked to us of different crops. We are the largest FPO in the country. We're also the largest grape exporters in the country. We also happen to be the largest tomato growers and processors in the country. Besides, of course, we do a host of products like fresh fruits, bananas and melons, and the whole range, because we've got a retail arm which has got about 15 stores, and we've got a B2B and B2C reach to customers. So all said and done is we always look at things from a farmer perspective and trying to create a sustainable channel from the farmer to the consumer, in a way bridging the rural to the urban, which is a big divide in India, where you can drive 20 kilometers outside an urban city and the diaspora is completely different. And what we are trying to do is bridge this and create a better value chain in the country. So that's as brief as I can get at the moment, but as we go forward, I'll try and tell you more. Thanks.
Thank you, Azharji. Now over to Namrata. For a person who preaches what she believes in, Namrata, if you can please give a short introduction about IHA, as the name might be new for some of our audiences.
Right, so IHA essentially stands for India Honey Alliance, and I'm quite proud to be associated with this because this is the only alliance of its type which represents honey as the topmost agenda in India. So India Honey Alliance currently, I think, represents more than almost about 90% of the entire honey industry in India. We are the largest stakeholders of honey. As far as the government is concerned, scientific bodies are concerned. The biggest thing, to take from what Azhar also said about representing the value chain, and also from what David spoke about, it has to be sustainable and it has to start right from the bottom up. So one of the biggest things that was ensured by IHA, and I went all out to try and getting the beekeepers involved in it, because they are actually the ones who collect the honey from the hives, and they need to be represented because they form the biggest issue in the supply chain, where the honey, they collect the honey, it moves on to processing, it moves on to retailers, and so on and so forth, and into the homes. So India Honey Chain, I think India Honey Alliance is truly inclusive in that respect, because we have scientific collaborations, we have consumer organizations working with us, we have foundations which are a part of this, which are working very closely with the beekeepers. And we have actually created an impression across the length and breadth of India, where we have representations from the South India, from Tamil Nadu, right up to Himachal and the middle states of India. And Pune, Azhar, you may be interested in knowing, is one of the largest consumers of honey in India, yeah, as a city. So yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Namrata. And with this dynamic profile, and as a body representing 90% of the industry, we are keen to understand more about the efforts being put in by the stakeholders from the sector to maintain consumer confidence. Summarizing it all, it will be helpful for our audience to listen from you that how the sustainability with the genuineness of the product is maintained and further relate to the end consumers.
Thanks, Shubhi. So one of the biggest things that India Honey Alliance is trying to do, and I had learned this from my Eat Right campaign, we took that forward, was that it can only be done in a collaborative manner through entire stakeholder participation, making sure that we work with the government, I work with the scientific bodies, I work with consumers, and for the beekeepers, of course, the training programs, the certifications, and forming a consortium where the entire work can be sort of taken forward. And one of the biggest thing is, of course, on testing for purity, making sure standards are set, and primarily that they should be fit for purpose. So sustainability, of course, is a very big thing, and the Indian government is doing a fair amount of work to, there is something called the National Bee Board, and India Honey Alliance works very closely with that. We work with Food Safety and Standards Authority very closely to make sure that standards which are set are also adhered. All our members are fully compliant with purity and with sustainability. So there is a fair amount of work which is being done. And as far as the consumer organizations and the consumer knowledge is concerned, I think it's very important to form a balanced opinion and to have the correct information going out to the consumers so that they can make informed choices about whatever they buy. For that, we have set up a webinar within about 4 or 5 months only of our existence. We created a webinar over a full series called Hive to Home. And the next one is also coming up, where the base of honey and everything to do with honey, whether it is its palliative nature, its preventive nature, the microbial properties, antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and all of those things are actually informed to the consumer to make sure it's fully sustainable. RapeNet is, of course, I think what Azhar was already aware of. we are also using that as a white paper for the traceability for honey. So yeah, there's a fair amount of work which is being done.
That's very interesting to know, Namrata. Means a lot of information is quite enlightening for us. With that, Azharji, Sahyadri Agro indeed is a brand which has transformed a commodity into a product. We are very curious to know about what measures have you taken to secure consumer confidence for fresh produce in foreign lands like the UK or the European countries. Here we are talking about consumers who don't get to interact with you, but they just see your products on the shelf. So do you have additional standards or certification process which you incorporate to gain consumer confidence, or what is your strategy in this entire dynamic?
Thanks for that question, Shubhi. What really happens is it's been a long journey to really establish this whole thing, and a lot of it is driven from the buyer end or from the retail end, because the retailers typically have their own brand images, and they, in collaboration, demand a lot of standardization to be able to supply to them, and therefore what goes on the shelf post that becomes a standard adopted by the retailer and then pushed down to the back end. So there's a lot of backward integration coming in from the retailer side. So over the years, I mean, every year we've kind of got into upgrading ourselves, and right from the beginning, it's been a journey where right in the beginning where we had global gap, or it was so we're looking at the farmer end of the farm certification, which is global gap. Then we have the factory certifications, where we have BRC or ISO, FSCC. We're also every retailer or a country will also have its own unique kind of certification which we would like to have. For example, in case where we're supplying Tesco's in the UK, they have their own certification which is called TNC, or Tesco Nurture's Choice. So we are certified for that. Then again, we are certified on the sustainable side or on the ethical audit side. So we have a lot of ethical audits which are happening, so it's not only about operations, it's not only about farm management, it's also about how do we treat our growers, our staff, our people. We have the right systems. Are we paying them correctly, the right wages? Are we paying them on time? Do we have contracts in place? So even the ethical audit is being done regularly, and we are certified on those fronts. Then of course we have what is called a fair trade certification, which ensures that we're giving a very fair amount of money going back to our growers. So that's the certification we have. We have Rainforest Alliance. We are kosher certified. We're certified for FDA. So there's a host of certifications, essentially, which every country demands, or every customer demands, or every retailer demands, which we have catered to, thereby building confidence of our buyers, of our importers, of our retailers in the Sahyadri brand, that Sahyadri is able to really deliver not only just a product, but also a sustainable story behind the product. And that story then becomes a point of difference for our retailers to work with us. And it separates us from the rest of the people. It makes our retailers more confident about the product they're receiving and putting on the shelf, because at the end of the day, they have a lot of brand value which is going out on the shelf, and they are secure that they're working with us. So it's a chain reaction. So our growers to our CPU, to our CPU or to our company, and from there onwards to the retailers and the importers in the different land, and then to the consumer. The entire chain is linked by certifications, ensuring traceability, ensuring sustainability, ensuring standards, and therefore, at the end of the day, the consumer is benefited in many ways.
I'm sure that our audience must be overwhelmed learning the amount of efforts which go in the backdrop before you actually transform a commodity into a product, from ethical audits to Rainforest Alliance to certification for your specific clients. It appears that you have clearly created a niche in fresh sector. And as a farmer producer organization, how do you ensure that implementation of this very specific SOP through the value chain? Because as you said that you have forward and backward linkages both. So how you're able to translate that knowledge to the lowest, to the farmer level, and from and ensuring that it then is translated throughout the value chain.
Very importantly, like I said, this is not an overnight journey. So it's taken us a long time to build trust, to get the farmers recognize that what we're asking them is actually something which is going to only be beneficial to them. We did face resistance in the beginning, saying, why do we need to do all this? We've never done all this all our year for generations, and the typical kind of resistance that you come across. But once they recognize the value and the need, and the fact that they can even get better monies at the end of the day, which is a great motivational factor, and we find that they listen to that, and we then obviously have systems in place. We've got teams in place, we've got agronomists in place, departments in place which are actually monitoring and ensuring that everything is up to date, our data is up to date, our growers are adhering to standards. All our produce is tested in laboratories before they are shipped out. So every farm lot or part of a farm, or every grower is tested for close to about 400 chemicals, and all of those chemicals have to be below detection limit or within the acceptable limit, especially for the UK, as per the EU norms. And only if it passes that test, then we kind of bring in the fruit, or the fruit is allowed to be packed for the UK. So the proof of the pudding is that all the systems are in place when a farmer passes the test. And the very fact that we've got close to about a few thousand growers who regularly pass this test for such highly regulated markets like the EU and the UK, itself proves that we've got things working and our growers are listening. Yeah. Importantly, here we also, as a matter of proof, we also can, we've got traceability system also. So a kilo of our produce, of grapes, of any product, in a small village in the UK or anywhere else, can actually be traced back to a grower, to the standards, to the management that he has led to, and we can actually do that sitting here in India and identify all of that. And also, as a matter of transparency, we are also the first FPO or maybe an aggregator in India, one of the few, to actually implement blockchain. So we also implemented blockchain, which also gives you more transparency in all our systems, in all our modules, which anybody from a retailer, from an importer, or any stakeholder can actually view. And as you know, once you enter data into a blockchain model, it cannot be deleted or it cannot be changed. And that data is readily available to people who we deal with. So all our systems, which are transparent in manner, help our customers understand us better, and we don't really have anything hidden behind. Everything is very transparent and clear, and our systems work.
So pleased to learn about these fine details, Asad ji, as it's not only the reputation of Sahyadri brand, but brand India as well, which we represent across the globe. With that, Namrata, we're pleased to know that with IHA, you guys are trying to create a niche and a collective value chain for the honey sector. We are talking about transforming commodities into products, and IHA, with its all-inclusive alliance of stakeholders, from honey companies to exporters to beekeepers, farmers, and processors. Can you help us know what are the key challenges faced by the industry through the supply chain, and what are the key efforts which your organization and members are putting to overcome obstacles like those?
To take from exactly what Azhar was talking about of traceability, and the GrapeNet technology is a very, very strong technology which has been used. And you'll be pleased to know that we have also aligned with AOAC India. Out of that, Dr. Kaushik Dasgupta, who's actually created that entire technology of GrapeNet. Similar thing is being applied for honey as well. where the traceability right down to the flora, also the system which is going to be fit for purpose in the Indian context, considering we've got 4 species of bees, and we've got something like 20,000 flora. So the bees literally take nectar from any of these, pick up, do the pollination, create honey. All of that needs to be a clear system of blockchain and traceability. The government is also doing that. Some of the issues with, I wouldn't really say supply chain, but the challenges which are faced by the honey industry are actually a little more than just the supply chain. So under supply chain, if you want to talk, I would say one of the biggest issues that small things like the farmer or the beekeeper faces an issue of say, migration from one state into another, from one flowering area into another with the bees. The bees die. Sometimes, his permits may be a problem. So that automatically impacts his business and impacts his basic, what should I say, his manufacturing unit, which is actually the bee. The bee is the one which is the baker of the honey. So those are one set of issues which need to be looked at and which are being looked at in terms of traceability and better packaging industry and things like that. The other issue, which I think not just the honey industry, it is probably the entire food and beverage industry and a lot of other industries face, is issues with the surround sound. Sometimes there is no balanced point of view which is being expressed, whether it is to do with honey, whether it is to do with other food items, whether it is to do with export or import. It is sometimes the sound which is being created, whether it's good, bad, ugly, which needs to be actually placed on an equitable and a balanced platform, basis knowledge, basis scientific information, and then pushed it onto a consumer, very similar to what David said a little while ago, to make sure that it's shaped properly. It has to be shared properly. It has to be embedded properly. So the consumer, and especially when you said that, when it really hit home for me again, that the consumer must know what he's having and must be able to make his own informed decision. So that is, I think, one of the challenges that we need to have. And because of that, IHA is actually collaborating with a great deal of scientific organizations. Some of them are like CBTRI, they are one of the topmost institutes in India, PUSA Institute, CBTRI, AOAC, so that we have a basis of science and clear information. So that is something I think that we are doing, and I think it'll go a long way in terms of consumer education and overcoming some of these challenges.
Thank you, Namrata. We acknowledge and appreciate that IHA works closely with international experts to promote science-based quality standards for Indian honey. So what are the current practices of sourcing, testing, packaging, etc., to ensure that the honey becomes the preferred choice in the global market?
So currently all our members, a lot of them do tend to take from their aggregators, their beekeepers, who create the honey, and the traceability and the testing is done at source. It's passed on to retailers, and then it goes on, so on and so forth, after passing, in fact, rather stringent tests by the Indian government. In fact, the FSSAI standards are probably the most, what should I say, the toughest standards to pass across the world. So once that is done, then of course the honey goes through a standardized system of packaging and sourcing, and then moving on to various retailers, and of course into our homes. And different types of honey, because the quality of honey differs from every area. It could be a golden liquid is what it's known as in India, whereas abroad, I know in UK and in other places, it is a honey cream, which is eaten a lot more like a bit like a jam on your toast. And so it is a different way of different types that we have. I think one of the largest challenges, what you mentioned earlier also, that India faces is the number of flora that we have. So there is no way to control the bee flying from which flower and picking up from where, and where that honey is coming from, and that's where the traceability and the whole challenge will be. So the members currently also are fairly cognizant of this, and they're all working, I must say, very, very closely with a lot of bodies, and we would be quite happy to take on and look at a collaboration with BSI or other certification bodies across India, considering we are a nascent organization. We are fairly new. We are only about, I would say, about 5 months old, and we are babies. So we would be quite happy to pick up collaboration with some of the international institutes and associations, to see how this can be taken forward, picking up some of the best practices from across the world, especially from those little, like Azhar said, from the smaller villages in the UK.
Thank you, Namrata. Imagine who would have thought that honey and grapes, two so different from each other products, are trudging the same path for creating supply chain narrative around benefiting from all dominations of the industry and also putting in efforts to create a balanced impression for the sector. Thank you so much, Azharji and Namrata, for your very valuable knowledge base. With this, I will move on to our final guest, Mr. Richard Warren, who is the Regional Director, Food and Retail Supply Chain for BSI Group. Richard handles the UK, Ireland, Continental Europe, India, Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. Looking forward to hearing from your global expertise, Richard. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So I'm just waiting for that little thing to pop up on my screen that says, there it is, show my screen. Okay, so there we go. Hopefully you can see my screen. Let me just minimize that down. Okay, transforming products into commodities. Now you may wonder why I've got a picture of the latest Bentley Continental on the screen. The world is full of cars. A better example of a commodity you probably couldn't wish to find, but there are luxury brands out there. And what converts a commodity into a luxury brand? Let's have a look at that. Now, while I love cars, I want to look at something a little closer to home, and that's bottled water. And it's a highly commoditized market. It's worth a huge amount of money, 350 billion, growing at a huge compound annual growth rate. It's a commodity. Let me just say this stalled for a moment. But I want to give you an example of a premium bottled water. Fiji water. You might not have heard of it. You might have consumed it. But there you go. This is from their website. As you can see, it begins as a cloud. High above Fiji, over 1,600 miles from the nearest continent. Tropical rain falls and is purified by equatorial trade winds in a pristine rainforest surrounded by ancient dormant volcanoes. Are you beginning to get the picture? Slowly filtered by volcanic rock, it gathers minerals and electrolytes that creates Fiji's water's soft, smooth taste. Earth's finest water. That's a Lamborghini of bottled water. And it's the way they sell their products, the way they tell their story. And that it's all about being able to tell that story and telling it well. Many organizations sometimes really struggle to tell their stories. I loved those questions that came through that you put the panelists through. Azhar, for example, doing a huge amount of work and effort with a lot of business-to-business programs that he's required to do. How do you get all of that effort? How do you get all of that commitment? How do you get all of the customer promise out there in front of consumers where it actually means something? That is the trick. And today it's very, very important, probably more important than ever before, to be able to tell your story extremely well in the market, particularly when we have social media. But the question is, how do we do this effectively? How do we do it? And this is a big challenge when you've got products which are being mixed and blended, and counterfeiting is on the rise, and all of these things erode and just chip away at consumer confidence. Consumers today have questions like, can I trust this food? Where does it come from? Is the label claim true? How was it made? Who made it? But I think what we have here is a solution. It's a unique solution to this particular headache. And you can see the trust mark at the bottom of the screen, the Food Assurance Program, the kite mark Food Assurance Program. And that mark of trust you may be very aware of. This is a means for trusted, independent verification. Yes, but people say, well, yes, but what are you going to verify? Verify what? We set about creating a program to verify, in a nutshell, your consumer promise. We help you to tell your story. Well, indeed, you can make the promises yourself, and why not? We've heard people, saying all sorts of things, but the issue is, can you actually trust it? Honey, we spent a lot of time already talking about honey. Honey is a perfect example, and I look forward to picking up the conversation with you, Namrata, after the event today, because I think we actually have something which is going to be very compelling and very exciting and interesting for your members. I'd encourage you, if you haven't seen this, it's actually worth tracking down on Netflix, and it's called Lawyers, Guns, and Honey. And it is a fantastic documentary which lifts the lid, so to speak, on honey and the shady tactics that are going on behind the curtains to mix in other things like sugars to extend honey in terms of its volume, so that you can sell more products to more people, even though bee populations are under pressure and declining. And this really, there's all sorts out there which undermines the extremely good work and the value of Indian honey producers. India is one of the largest producers of honey, high quality honey, sometimes very special honeys, sometimes monofloral honeys, sometimes honeys that come from particular regions of India, which are very exciting and quite special and very unusual, and are definitely not commodities, but how to turn them into products. I've got here a fabulous example for you. And when we launched the program just about a year ago, we launched it with this company, the Scottish Bee Company. And let me introduce you to Ian and Susie. There they are. They are passionate about honey, and they are competing out there in the market as a relatively small company, but they're growing really quickly with their honey products against other honeys which may have been blended, mixed with other things that are significantly cheaper than they are. But they are passionate about bees, about bee health, bee welfare, and they talked to us and said, look, we know the power of the kite mark. Can you verify the product that we produce is from Scotland, that it is honey, and that it is produced only from heather? And we looked into it and we put a program today, and I'm very proud, I'm very pleased to be able to show you this. Hopefully you can see that on the camera. There you are, there is the kite mark actually on their product. And as a result of that, very shortly after they launched it, they secured a £300,000 order from Singapore and from Japan, two very difficult markets to crack, markets which are populated by very discerning consumers who really appreciate high quality products and the independent verification that we provide. And there it is. It really helps you to rebuild faith. It enables you to say exactly what your product is, and we verify that. We help you to communicate your supply chain story, and through independent verification, transform what ultimately might be a product into a Lamborghini or a Bentley of a product, a special premium product that can command high value and high prices in the market. So companies that we're engaging with at the moment, they're coming to us with all sorts of issues, and essentially this is a marketeer's dream, because yes, there are business-to-business programs out there like the BRC, IFS, and so forth, but you can talk to my mum. I mean, she's 92. I mean, she won't know what a BRC is, but she will understand exactly what the kite mark is and what it stands for, because being 92, and like many of us that are in middle age, and I still call myself middle-aged, we've grown up with the kite mark, and we know exactly what the kite mark stands for in terms of what it promises. So the companies that we're talking to are talking to us about, well, can you help us to communicate in what we're doing with circular economy, with our heritage of our product, the other quality attributes like how the product has been made, the purity of the product, for example, with respect to honey. And we construct a program which is unique for them, which allows them to put this particular mark of trust on their food products, just as you've seen me hold up to the camera. And the B, the S, and the V, as you can see, British Standards Verification, form this very unique and very special mark of trust that is extremely well known in the industry, and particularly amongst consumers. We've accumulated huge amounts of data about the visibility and the profile and what it actually means to consumers, not only in the UK, but throughout the Commonwealth, where the trust mark is extremely well known, loved, and trusted. And you can see here, this is data from our wonderful marketing team. 65% of our BSI kite mark clients say that it's increased sales. 80% of them say it has improved their business reputation. Lots of exciting statistics that I could talk about, but let's move forward. So what do you promise your consumers? Use the BSI kite mark as your brand ambassador. And that's all because people trust it. It comes back to those important things that David was talking about, and some of the questions that ran through all of those points that were put to the panelists about the product and whether you can actually trust it, and how to use this for commercial advantage in the market to gain better prices, gain market access, and of course, competitive advantage. And some of the companies that we're dealing with want first mover advantage, which is very, very exciting. So we help our clients tell their consumer story and their promise and get that in front of consumers in a very powerful way. So I think that brings me to the end of my presentation, and that really is just to conclude, was to say, how can we help, and to thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with our friends in India and around the world today.
Honestly, Richard, I'm amazed to learn that even certifications can be this bespoke. Thanks a lot. Be mindful of the time. I will quickly take a few questions which we have received in our question box. First one is for you, David. The question is, what I have heard is most interesting, because I have always thought certification is just a requirement, but it sounds like a more journey building. To use the new buzzword resilience, is that right?
Well, exactly. You know, if you go to university, you go to university. If you don't get a certificate, how do you prove you've actually passed? So you can engage in anything in the world. I can give you all a recipe of ingredients to go and cook a meal, but what's the output? Now, if you do it properly, you get a certificate, right? So the certificate is demonstrating what it is. But compliance people sell a certificate. Marketing people tell you the story behind the certificate. Now, if you listen to what Azar was talking about, which was fantastic, I really relate to getting the cooperatives together, going out to all those farmers and growers, because I've done it in the Philippines 20 years ago with asparagus, with Del Monte, with Dole. You know, we went out there, and if you got 100 farmers and you gave them the seed and you gave them the fertilizer, and you send them off to do their own thing, you would find that there would be people there that would produce 10 tons per hectare, some would do 20 tons per hectare, and the majority would do 5 tons per hectare. With the same rain, the same sunshine, the same soil. We put a recipe in place of what good looks like. When you need your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your fruit thinning, your fertilizer, your integrated pest management control, your minimization of use of chemicals. We created a recipe which is time, temperature, sequence. We had people increasing their profitability by 300%, bringing electricity to the house for the first time, sending their kids to school because they had electricity and light at night. That's the value of certification. Now, that's a very emotional story I just told you. That's about doing a lot of good things and alleviating people from poverty, right? That's what certification does. Now, take away all your systems and procedures, you'll go back to what happened before. The elastic band will just shrink back. You'll lose the discipline, which is a mechanism to do the right thing and a mechanism for continuous improvement. And sometimes we don't think about that because we just think of the certificate and we don't use the creativity of telling the story. Now, as are what he explained there with all the fruit growers and the vegetable growers, you know, he's obviously been very successful because he's supplying people like Tesco and the big retailers out there. So he's doing something right. But you know what? There's a lovely story behind there.
Yeah.
And if he wanted to go direct one day and get a higher price, and if you look at what's happened with COVID now, food companies were very much dictated by retailers who monopolize the channel to market. Well, that's changing today because you've got home delivery and sales, you've got brands going direct now, you've got rediscovery of market pathways, and what they're looking for is a story, and they're looking for something different. And if you find the right markets, they got the money to pay for it, because as soon as you tell the story, you're no longer talking about a brand. You're talking about something that I can share with my loved ones and my guests, that I'm buying something special, and because you're special, I'm going to give this to you. And you know what? We say as soon as you get a kite mark, put your prices up 15%, because if you can't put your prices up an extra 15%, it's not worth doing it. And it's only going to cost you 1%. So I think if we then, just to finish off, if we go and look at the top 5 reasons that people give for certification, right, from 250,000 of our customers, the first thing they say is the reason we do it is trust. We have an instrument of trust. Like, I go to university, I have my certificate, I have my CV, I go for my job interview, I give my certificate, it proves that I have met the minimum qualification. So number 1 is trust. Number 2, improves processes and reduces mistakes. It's the repeatability. So think of standards about cooking. And for all those of you who love cooking and you love your mum's cooking, she's practiced that recipe for 100 years. The ingredients, the sequence, the time, the temperature. Standard does the same thing. It's a recipe for business or a recipe for doing anything. So improves processes, improves repeatability, reduces costs and reduces mistakes, and improves your product. And finally, it attracts customers and new markets, and it manages your risk. So think of it in those terms. If you're putting a standard in place because someone's telling you, it's too late. You could be putting it in place to make your business better and not doing it under sufferance because someone's telling you to do it. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Richard, my next question from the audience is for you. This is from a producer of the spices from India, who is saying that they are interested in Kite Mark, particularly to access and provide reassurance for their produce in UK market. Will it give them a competitive advantage?
Okay, good. Thank you, Shubi. Well, first of all, in Britain, we absolutely love the spices that come from India. I think, are one of the world's largest consumers of curry outside of India. And of course, how do you get that advantage across to consumers? And that is by way of the Kite Mark. It's recognized here. This is going to give you a commercial and a competitive advantage, particularly if you're working with partners here that are either packaging the product here, or perhaps you're selling the pre-packed product in India and shipping it to the UK, where it can be shipped with bearing the Kite Mark on it. And it's important to get that message across to consumers, either through the website or, as we do as part of the process, is to create a 3D QR code through the BSI Verify I profile that is part and parcel of the program, that enables consumers to take their phone and scan that with their camera, and that will then take the consumer directly to the producers, your website, where you may have photographs, a video, and it just helps to get that story across. So it doesn't involve blockchain. This is systems and technology that has been around for 20 years, and it works extremely well. It's very effective, and we're able to put a program in place which supports the claim that you want to make about your spices, about how they were made, the purity of those spices, where they came from, other special attributes that create a point of difference. So we'd be very pleased to engage with your marketeers It's a wonderful process, by the way. When we sit down with our clients, like yourselves who are interested, we go through a procedure or a program of a workshop where we really set out in the way that David has touched on to say, well, what are the features that you really have, and what are these as consumer benefits? What are the points of difference? How do you go about it at the moment? And you know, sometimes it involves in the owner of the company, because it goes right back to the DNA of why that company, perhaps your company, was set up in the first place. And the answer is often the same, that we set this company up to make a difference. I know it's a very trite and well-trodden statement to say, but it's true. And the founders of the organization say, well, we actually did this because, and suddenly we are engaging with the reason why the company was set up, what their consumer promise actually is. And it's suddenly all the lights come on, and then we realize, the company realize, the marketers realize what their value is, what their point of difference is, and suddenly we can construct a program which helps them convey that promise to consumers in a very powerful and compelling way by using the kite mark. It's also being used by companies in the UK, but it's going to be used by companies outside of the UK that want to gain market access and market advantage in the UK, because it's so well recognized, as I say, not just in the UK, but around our Commonwealth countries as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much.
Be good to talk with you later, yes, about that.
Yeah, Azharji, the next question is for you. I'm sorry, Kadambari, that will be the last one for now. During pandemic, demand for fresh fruit has increased drastically, and the spotlight is on food safety and hygiene. Can you please help us understand if international retailers are asking for extra mile quality assurance, or it's business as usual?
The international retailers are obviously asking for the same standards. It's business as usual in one way, but we've got our own sense of responsibility towards our staff, towards our labor, and we need to ensure that the systems we have, because at any point of time we have 2,000 to about 4,000 labor working in our facilities, and that's quite a crowd when you're talking of social distancing, you know. And when you're trying to get the volume that we really churn out on a daily basis, which is close to about 300 tons of produce on a daily basis, you know, goes through our facilities, and with 2,000, 4,000 labor, you know, more than any retailer asking us to do something, it becomes our prime responsibility and focus to ensure that nothing goes wrong. And we've tried, we've done. You know, just like the whole world is caught unaware and not really knowing what to do, we were also in a similar position, and we took some decisions on how to manage it all. You know, we reduced the labor in the pack house. We set up 2 pack houses so that we did the same work in 2 pack houses instead of 1. You know, we had lesser vehicles going out, lesser teams going out for harvesting. And we had ambulances on our site in case of any problems. We had on-site doctors. We had systems in place to make sure that everybody was checked while coming in and going out. You know, so it was a massive kind of a drill every day that we were undergoing, just to make sure that nobody, you know, nothing was wrong. And you know, thanks God, or you know, we were just lucky that really we've been through the last few months with the support of the government, where they gave us permissions to run the show even during lockdowns, because we are from the essential, you know, essential list of companies, and you know, they allowed our subsidiary companies to also support us. For example, you know, the packaging material companies and everything that we need, or transporters. So all of that was, you know, we managed it with a lot of stress. With a lot of systems, with a lot of discipline, with a lot of army drill, and social distancing. We kind of divided the work here and there. And you know, at the end of the day, all I can say is that we didn't really have a single case where, you know, in the labor we've had problems with staff, in the admin staff. But the labor that worked close to about 2,000 to 4,000, we managed to pass through seasons without any casualty at all. So, you know, so I think, like I said, the proof is in the pudding, and I think we've come out of it safely. So hopefully we did something right.
You indeed did, and you continue to do that. For our audience, sorry, we have number of questions remaining, but we are mindful of time. So we will take those on individual basis with our speakers and revert back to you. Kadamri, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. That was absolutely brilliant. Before we log out, I would just like to say a really special big thank you to our speakers for taking out the time to join us and share all that excellent information that you have today. I'd also like to say thank you to all of our audience who've actually stayed on even though we've run over time. We will be sharing a copy of the recording and the summary with you in the next few days. And we are really sorry that we weren't able to answer all those questions. So if there are any questions that you'd like us to answer, or if you'd like to connect with BSI, do let us know. Just feel free to reach out to us. Just a last reminder to make sure that you do follow our social media handles to stay updated on our upcoming webinars. Thank you very much, everyone.